The first thing they saw was not an army. It was the sea itself moving. Dark shapes rising and falling with the waves stretched across the horizon like something alive. Ships emerging from the mist one after another until the ocean was no longer empty but filled with war. 333 warships, an entire fleet so vast it turned water into a weapon, advancing slowly but with unstoppable confidence. And against them, there were only 13. Just 13 ships, standing still in the narrow Strait of Myeongnyang. No reinforcements, no backup, no hope of survival. At the front of those ships stood Yi Sun-sin, a man who had already been broken once before this battle even began. He had been betrayed by his own court, stripped of his command, thrown into prison, and brought back only when there was nothing left to lose. By the time he returned, Korea was already collapsing under the weight of invasion. Cities had burned, villages had fallen, fleets had been destroyed, and the sea that once protected them now belonged to the enemy. What remained was not an army, not a defense, but a last stand that should not have existed. Even his own men could feel it. Fear moved quietly across the decks as sailors stared at the horizon, then at each other, then back again at the endless wall of ships approaching them. Some whispered prayers, some tightened their grip on weapons, and some had already accepted that they would not survive the day. Because no one survives something like this, not in war, not when the numbers are this far apart. But Yi Sun-sin did not look at the fleet the way they did. He did not see numbers, he did not see fear, he saw the water. The Strait of Myeongnyang was narrow, violent, unpredictable, a place where the current twisted beneath the surface and changed direction without warning, where even experienced sailors struggled to maintain control of their ships. It was not just a battlefield, it was something far more dangerous, something alive. And Yi understood it better than anyone. He knew that if the enemy entered that space, their strength would become their weakness. The Japanese fleet advanced with absolute confidence, war drums echoing across the water as their ships pushed forward in tight formation, believing this would be another easy victory. They had won every battle before this, crushed every resistance, and nothing in front of them looked like a threat. As the first line of ships entered the strait, the water began to change. At first it was subtle, a slow pull beneath the hull, a shift in direction that seemed almost unnoticeable. But then, it grew stronger. The current twisted, dragging ships out of formation, breaking their rhythm, turning their advance into confusion. Oars lost synchronization, vessels drifted, commanders shouted orders that could no longer be followed. The perfect formation began to fracture. Yi saw it immediately, and without hesitation, he gave the order to attack. 13 ships moved forward into a space filled with enemies, not retreating, not hesitating, but charging directly into chaos. The first impact was violent. Cannons fired, arrows filled the air, and ships collided as the current forced them together in unpredictable ways. Wood cracked, men were thrown from decks, and the narrow strait turned the battle into something brutal and immediate, where numbers could not be used properly. Korean ships targeted isolated enemies, striking quickly, breaking them apart before moving to the next. This was not a fight against an army. It was a fight against fragments of one. The current grew stronger, pulling ships apart, dragging them into each other, turning strength into disorder. But even then, the numbers were still overwhelming. For every enemy ship that fell, dozens remained. The horizon was still filled with war, still closing in, still impossible. And slowly, fear began to return. Some sailors hesitated, some began to fall back, the reality of the situation crashing into them again. This was still 13 against hundreds, still a battle they could not win. For a moment, it felt like everything would collapse, like the line would break just as it had before, like this would end in the same silence as every defeat that came before it. Yi saw that moment. He saw the hesitation, the doubt, the fear spreading faster than the enemy itself. And in that moment, he made a decision that no one expected. He turned his ship. Alone. Straight toward the enemy fleet. No support followed him. No formation moved with him. Just one ship cutting through the water toward an entire army. Behind him, the men stood frozen, watching their commander move forward into certain death without hesitation. It did not look like strategy. It did not look like survival. It looked like something else entirely. Something impossible. The waves crashed harder. The enemy closed in from every side. Arrows struck the deck. Cannons fired. And still Yi did not stop. He moved deeper into the chaos, closer to the center, until his ship was surrounded on all sides. And then, without waiting, without hesitation, he attacked. One ship against an entire fleet. And in that moment, something changed. Because this was no longer about numbers, and it was no longer about fear. This was the moment the battle turned into something else entirely. Something that would decide whether this day would be remembered as the end, or the beginning of something no one believed was possible. What happened next did not feel like a battle. It felt like something breaking apart in real time. As Yi Sun-sin pushed his single ship deeper into the heart of the Japanese fleet, the chaos around him reached a level no commander could control. The current surged harder, twisting violently beneath the surface, dragging ships sideways, spinning them out of formation, forcing them into each other with crushing force. What had once been a perfectly organized invasion now looked like a storm of wood and steel colliding without direction. Japanese warships, built for open water dominance, suddenly found themselves trapped in a space where size and numbers became a liability. Ships crashed into one another. Oars snapped under pressure. Commanders shouted orders that vanished in the roar of water and cannon fire. And the more they tried to regroup, the more the sea pulled them apart. And in the middle of that chaos, Yi did not slow down. His ship struck with precision, targeting isolated vessels, tearing through them before they could react, then moving again before the enemy could surround him. It was not reckless. It was controlled destruction. A strategy built not on power, but on understanding the battlefield better than anyone else. But for the men watching from behind, it still looked impossible. One ship against hundreds, surrounded on all sides, refusing to retreat. For a moment, they hesitated, caught between fear and disbelief, unsure whether they were witnessing courage or madness. And then something changed. One ship moved forward. Then, another. And another. The hesitation broke. The fear that had been holding them back began to collapse under the weight of what they were seeing. If one man could charge into that storm alone, then this was not over. The remaining Korean ships surged forward, not as scattered survivors, but as a force reborn, driven by something stronger than numbers. Now the battle shifted completely. 13 ships, moving with purpose, striking where the enemy was weakest, using the current instead of fighting against it. The Japanese fleet, still massive, still overwhelming, could no longer function as one. It had become fragmented, divided, vulnerable. Ships that should have supported each other were now separated by violent water, unable to regroup, unable to form a proper line, unable to bring their full strength to bear. And that was the moment the impossible began to happen. One by one, Japanese ships were destroyed, not in a single massive clash, but in relentless, calculated strikes that turned their advantage into a weakness. The sea itself seemed to choose sides, pulling enemies into range, breaking their formations, exposing them again and again. Panic began to spread, not slowly, not quietly, but violently, as the realization hit that this was no longer a guaranteed victory. This was a trap, a battlefield they did not understand, controlled by a commander who knew exactly how to use it. Some ships tried to retreat, turning away from the strait, but the current fought them, dragging them back, forcing them into collisions, into chaos, into destruction. Others pushed forward blindly, hoping to overwhelm the Korean line, only to be isolated and destroyed before they could even engage properly. The battle had turned into something brutal and relentless, a constant cycle of attack and collapse, where no movement was safe and no position was secure. Hours passed, but the intensity did not fade. The water grew darker, filled with debris, broken wood, shattered weapons, and the remains of ships that had once formed an unstoppable fleet. The sound of war never stopped. Cannons firing, men shouting, ships breaking, the sea itself roaring as if it had become part of the fight. And still, Yi did not stop. He moved through the chaos like it was his own creation, striking again and again, never losing control, never allowing the battle to return to the enemy. By the time the tide began to shift again, by the time the current started to calm, the outcome was already decided. The massive fleet that had arrived with absolute confidence was no longer an army. It was scattered, broken, retreating in fragments, no longer able to continue the fight. Ships pulled away from the strait, not in formation, not with discipline, but with fear. What had begun as an overwhelming invasion had ended in something no one could have predicted. 13 ships had not just survived, they had won. But even in that victory, there was no celebration. No moment of triumph, only silence settling over the water as the battle finally ended. The men who remained stood on their decks, looking out at what was left, trying to understand what had just happened, because this was not how war was supposed to work. This was not how battles were decided. This was something else. Something that would be remembered not just as a victory, but as a moment where the impossible became real. And at the center of it all stood Yi Sun-sin, the man who had taken 13 ships and turned the sea itself into a weapon. A man who proved that numbers do not decide war, control does. And on that day, in the narrow Strait of Myeongnyang, control belonged to him.